interdisciplinary work, and I'll quote the right language, worldly engagement. So I'm actually looking forward to worldly engagement from Meg. Meg Holden is now Assistant Professor in Urban Studies and Geography at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. She's been an active applied researcher in projects including the Centre for Interactive Research on Sustainability in Vancouver. She's a founding director of the Regional Vancouver Urban Observatory, and that's an institution which monitors sustainability indicators. So Dr. Holden has a lot of experience with sustainability indicators. And she's also a participant in Metro's Vancouver's Vital Signs project, which is always a good thing. I think we should have as many vital signs as we can sustain. She's published widely in all of the big-time journals, at least the ones that I know are big-time: Social Indicators Research, Planning Theory and Practice, Ecological Economics, Environment and Planning, and many others. And I'm sure that you'll join with me in welcoming Meg Holden.
To what has been a really fascinating and rich couple of days of discussion with all of you. So let me do my best. My presentation will be about the concept of sustainability, and I know from what I've been able to gather from your interest in research over the past couple of days that sustainability isn't the frame in which you all work, but I'm going on the assumption that it is at least an allied frame for all of you. And my approach to talking about sustainability is going to be an attempt to get the hair standing up on the back of your neck a little bit, with an attempt to leave time at the end for you to let me have it. And just hoping that none of you have any right to tomatoes in your back pocket. So I do have a few slides and a few photographs, and I'll just note that the photographs are all taken by John Goldsmith from Vancouver. So sustainability and the rhetoric of reaction. In 1991, the development economist and U.S. public intellectual Albert O. Hirschman wrote The Rhetoric of Reaction. In this book, which was prescient of more contemporary popular books such as Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine and James C. Scott's Seeing Like a State, Hirschman proposed a way to understand the kinds of arguments made by conservatives about proposals for change. Drawing examples from three key periods of reactionary thought: the aftermath of the French Revolution, the 19th century push for universal suffrage, and the dismemberment of the welfare state, now known as neoliberalism, he tracks the development, the deployment, and intertwining of the arguments about why efforts to direct positive change fail. His compelling trilogy of modes of arguments included arguments of perversity, futility, and jeopardy. To wit, perversity. Well-intentioned efforts toward change always backfire and exacerbate the problem you're trying to solve. Futility. The change will achieve nothing because it fails to acknowledge incontrovertible political, social, or economic laws. The acquisitiveness and selfishness of human nature doom all efforts for social improvement. And finally, jeopardy. The change will threaten to destroy some cherished, previous, hard-won accomplishments such as freedom or democracy. Hirschman's schema is an attempt to come to grips with the massive, stubborn, and exasperating otherness of others, and those are his words. In his case, the systematic lack of communication between groups of citizens, such as liberals and conservatives, progressives, and reactionaries. In my comments today, I would like to use this schema as a way to understand the limits that are seen to exist to what I call a pragmatic approach to sustainable development. It's difficult to go about one's life in these times without being faced with the feeling that these are very dangerous times for the human race, for the globe itself, but I'm not going to go too far in that direction or bludgeon you with that particular hammer today. The tool I'm going to use banks in the opposite direction. So it may well be that the failure to address the challenges of unsustainability threatens to doom us all, but what I will argue is that the opposite danger is also true. That is, building upon Alfred North Whitehead's maxim that the major advances in civilization are processes which all but wreck the societies in which they occur, I will demonstrate the pervasiveness of arguments that our best attempts to move towards sustainability today may present threats that are just as grave as those of not acting. I expect that drawing out these perspectives will make us all a little squirmy. After all, it is rare indeed to find anyone to speak overtly against sustainability. While the talking heads nod with universal acceptance and use the concept of sustainability as a virtue and an ideal, however, those who look a little bit lower will find the hands ringing with reasons why we should not, cannot, or must not change. My goal is not to refute each of these arguments one by one, but to show that they are examples of types of reasoning that have been persistently attractive to reactionaries throughout history. And for this reason, we should be skeptical of them. I will argue that the perversity argument is called upon by those who cast the new entrepreneurial and partnership and creative forms of governance as worse than more traditional regulatory roles that government plays. In discussing the use of the argument of futility, I will focus on critiques of participation in sustainable development as being ultimately ineffectual in changing underlying power structures and resource distributions. And the jeopardy argument is called upon by those who question the implications of the integrative and holistic aspect of sustainability frameworks within local planning and policy. I want to be clear that in pointing out some of the arguments against such an approach to sustainable development, I'm not calling those who make the arguments conservatives. I don't think we need a McCarthy era in the service of sustainability. Instead, I would venture that this way of understanding and interpreting the emerging policy and practice of sustainable development can help us understand the potential of initiatives to lead us towards genuinely new approaches to governing, managing, and living in our cities. Sustainable development is a large tent of ideas about governance and society-nature relationships. And because of its broad and vague scope, it is able to attract both reactionaries and revolutionaries. And I think it could be valuable in the context of the interdisciplinary group here gathered for this conference to discuss just how far that tent should and can stretch. So what I'm not going to go into in any depth is the meaning of sustainability in any pure sense, untainted by the failures, deceits, and discolorations of practice. Some of you will know that there is a raging academic debate about this matter, and we got into it a little bit at yesterday's faculty roundtable. So this could take our discussion a long ways afield. It would also be unpragmatic of me to give this debate any credence, as it is a pragmatic maxim, according to Richard Rorty, that disconnection from practice produces theoretical hallucinations. Mostly for our purposes, I think it's more productive to talk about sustainability in terms of how it is purported to make a difference in the creation and maintenance of places of meaning. That is, how we live and operate within and govern our cities and other local communities. In the planning, policy, and social science literatures related to sustainability, three of the features most commonly called upon with regard to the difference that sustainability makes are its reorganization of the powers and institutions of governance, its emphasis on participative techniques, and its integrative frame. To this end, examining the ways in which a sustainability framework does or does not offer promise of change in the domain of local governance, participatory processes, and an integrative approach is enough for us to take home. So just a few words before I delve into Hirschman's schema about what I mean by a pragmatic approach. I'm not using the term in sort of the loose, everyday meaning, but in terms of the pragmatism that was developed in late 19th century New England by what Louis Menand calls the Metaphysical Club in his book of the same title. And another group of social intellectuals working in New York and Chicago a little bit later. So I'm talking about some of the key figureheads being Charles Peirce, William James, John Dewey, Jane Addams, and their colleagues. A few aspects of this philosophy are important for us here. Pragmatic beliefs are rules for action, rather than analytic categories for the sake of themselves. Beliefs should be judged based on the difference they make in practice. So it is impossible for us to distinguish clearly between what is true in a particular context and what is good or has moral value. I agree with the environmental philosopher Brian Norton that sustainability must be a pragmatic idea if it is to hold any weight in reorienting the societies of the future, because of this integrated understanding of assessing outcomes and judging value, and because this orientation radically opens up possibilities for change. Because truth is always contextual in a pragmatic sense, It always requires social interpretation, tinkering, and experimentation.